Sonder, a word used to describe the profound feeling of realizing every stranger around you has a life as complex and important as your own. It's also the name of the town I grew up in. Sonder lies on the eastern coast of the UK, on the north side of England. If you reach Scotland, you've gone too far, but if you're in Scarborough, you've not gone far enough. It sits somewhere between there, though I don't think anyone could be more specific. You see, you can't find it on any map. Printed or digital, new or old, color-coded or satellite imagery, there is no sign of this town existing at all. If you pay enough attention online, you'll find the odd few people mentioning the place, like this that you're reading right now. Like a whisper passing by in a busy place, you only know it's there if you're looking for it. Yet to a vast majority of the world, Sonder is just a word. I was born there and raised within its confines. I moved away at 15, about 10 years ago. It was a peaceful seaside village, the type where everyone knows each other. The type where when someone hosts a get-together, all residents are invited. It was a close-knit community. I still remember it with mostly fond memories. The waves lapping onto the sand all through the night. The cobbled streets scorching your bare feet as you walk back from the beach on a summer's day. The dark woods that overlook the town from High Hill. High Hill is what we call the hill that stood next to Sonder. It blocked any chance of a view to other towns or cities. We resided in a valley at the edge of the sea, and whilst we liked it there, it felt very secluded. The town had a few small businesses. My favorite was Uncle Pete's Pizza. Everyone called him Uncle Pete, although he wasn't actually anybody's uncle. But his pizza place was perfectly between our home and my mom's pub. Every Friday she would pick up a pizza on the way home, absolutely no exceptions. Me and my older brother, Jacob, were always excited for this. Much of the town had been there for generations, the population naturally getting smaller as more and more of it became family. But a few people would move there every now and then. All of them found the town in the same way a leaflet coming through the letterbox while searching for somewhere to move to. Every single time, the same story, they were driven here by a house moving service. I guess with no directions or map, it would be difficult to make your own way here. They were lovely, they really helped us, they would always say. Nobody ever really seemed to question it much. I mean, it's not like we were trapped. We could leave whenever we wanted, make no mistake, Sonder was no prison. It didn't even feel like one. It's just difficult to find, and leaving just felt icky. Like you shouldn't do it. As the internet became mainstream, it became more and more obvious to people that the town was so hard to find. Suddenly people had friends from outside of Sonder, but they could never visit because they could never seem to find their way in. GPS signal was weak, and opening any app on your phone that tracked your location wouldn't pinpoint you. One truly odd thing about Sonder was the appliances. All of them had the same logo on somewhere, the letter V in a circle. Since leaving, I've tried to research this company, but to no avail. The moving company that people arrived in also had this logo on their vans. The town had its issues, none more known than the scream singers. At night, if you listened hard enough, you could hear them. A chilling, soft sound. It was almost like a distant scream, yet more melodic. Something enchanting, yet fills you with dread. Nobody ever saw them, but someone in the town would go missing every now and then, maybe once or twice a year. Some lived alone and hadn't been seen in a few days before anyone realized. Some were cuddled up to their partner in bed, only for their partner to wake up with them no longer in their arms. The only thing they had in common is that there was never any sign of entry or struggle. My entire life, I've known the echoes over the valley to mean trouble. But my mother used to tell me stories of when the townsfolk thought they meant hope, a simpler time. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly when people made the connection between the disappearances and the whistles of the night. But they would always start a few weeks before a disappearance and stop the night after someone had gone missing. This had always intrigued me, but not as much as it did my brother. Jacob found it fascinating. Perhaps because he had never had someone close to him taken and didn't understand the pain. To him, it was just a mystery wrapped in questions. Some believed the screensingers to be the ones taking these people. Some believed their calls to be a warning that something darker is coming. Whatever people believed their intentions to be, everyone knew that their somber singing over Sonder was only bad news. My fond memories of the town become clouded when the trauma of my final few days there enters my mind again. Years of therapy have helped me cope, but I feel talking about it publicly is the final thing that may bring me peace. As far as I know, I am the only person to have seen a screensinger. Or, at least, the only living person. It was the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. The 21st of June. Sonder has always held a small festival on this day. It dated back almost a century at the time, being the 97th consecutive solstice celebration. The festival took place not during those long sunlight hours, but as the sun began to set and the longest day ceased at about 9:30 p.m. But the town of Sonder felt more melancholy than usual, especially for the festivities that were going on. The screensingers had started their wails again about 3 weeks prior, getting louder and louder each passing night. Sure enough, about an hour after the festival began, you could faintly hear the noises again, piercing through the sweeter melodies of the festival and the chatter of the crowds. People tried to ignore it and continue the celebrations. But every time the wind blew in just a particular way to make the noises more prominent, you could see the look on everyone's faces. The unspoken, silent fear washing through the crowds like a wave. My mom's pub, really, our family pub, was right at the festival. As such, the doors were wide open and people kept coming in and out. It was always one of the busiest nights of the year. Me and Jacob were sat drinking red wine. He was 17 and had a proper glass, but I still had half lemonade in mine. It was the only night of the year I was allowed to drink alcohol. The festival was still going strong when Jacob had the idea to go a little out of town and get a better listen to the screensingers. I was hesitant, but I was always up for an adventure. So, half reluctantly, I agreed. We got a few streets away before the howling became louder than the music. We were stood in the perfect mix of unknown to one side and enjoyment to the other. We should not have kept going. But we did. We reached the final building before the cobbled streets turned to grass and mud and didn't stop there. Without saying a word to each other, it was like we knew what we wanted to do. We wanted to be the first people to have seen the screensingers, the first to understand them. We didn't know that only one of us would catch a glimpse. High hill was steep, but not too steep. You didn't need your hands to climb it, it just took a lot of energy. Every now and then, we looked back at Sonder. You would almost think it was a ghost town from how dark it looked, if not for the bright festival right in the center. The only clue of any life, all packed together. The sounds of cheering, singing, and music echoed up the hill. All the while, the sounds of ghostly wails echoed down. A battle between good and evil, not seen but only heard. As we reached the dark woods, we looked at each other. It felt like we hadn't spoken in ages, so I broke that. We're really doing this? Jacob nodded. I knew you would, I just needed to say something. Hearing nothing but ghastly screeches was driving me insane. We wandered around in there for what seemed like forever, though it was closer to maybe 5 minutes. Every slight crunch made me flinch and turn around. There was never anything there but the haunting screams which were all around us. We reached a clearing, and the sounds of the screamsingers seemed louder than ever. In the center of the clearing was a rock. about as tall as me and a little wider. Jacob held me, as he could clearly tell I was scared. "It's all right, it's just sounds. There's nothing to be afraid of. Maybe we should head back." His words didn't comfort me. They only told me one thing: he couldn't see what I could see. Stood on the rock is something I will never get out of my mind. A tall, gray figure, about twice as tall as any human I'd ever seen. It had 2 arms, but only one hand. The hand it had looked what I can only describe as twisted. Its fingers weaved together in a way that didn't make sense and certainly wasn't natural. The shape of it was overall humanoid, but the proportions were all wrong. It had no eyes, at least not at first. I was terrified looking at this thing, but the moment my heart truly dropped was when eyes appeared. They slowly came out of its skin. There was no evidence that this creature should even have eyes. There were no holes for them. But as its face opened in a mesmerizingly disturbing way, I saw 2 eyes slowly come forward. The face closed again, with the eyes looking right at us. There were only 2 eyes. I counted them. 1, 2. Its face opened up again as it let out a horrific scream. I ran. I ran faster than I ever had before in my life, only occasionally looking behind me to make sure Jacob was running with me. He was. But he wasn't running from the scream singer. He was only running to catch up with me. He had no idea why I was so scared at that moment. We ran all the way down High Hill, nearly tripping over. Running down a steep hill is difficult at the best of times. As we got back onto the cobbled streets, I turned around and looked up at the woods. No sign of anything chasing us, but the screams were still so loud even down here. By this point, Jacob had caught up and was right beside me. He kept asking why I was running, but I was too shocked to answer him yet. We ran another street, and he reached out to hold me. I stopped running and let him hug me. He told me that whatever I saw, it was going to be okay, and that we were safe. I closed my eyes with tears streaming down my face. I opened my mouth and began to explain what I saw, getting words out between choking on my tears. It was this gray thing on the rock. You could see the rock, right? Well, on top. I realized the howling had stopped. I opened my eyes. Jacob wasn't there. I was standing in the middle of the street with my arms out, hugging nobody. I looked to my right and could see the festival. I felt empty and confused. I walked through the crowd, tears still streaming down my face. I found my mother at the bar and she asked me where I had been and if I knew where Jacob was. I told her everything and she closed up for the night. We both knew that the scream singers had claimed their next victim. She wasn't angry at me for going to the woods. She held me tight and neither of us spoke a word. We just wept and wept until we were too tired and empty to weep anymore. The next day was Friday. I got out of bed in the morning after absolutely no sleep. My mom was downstairs, packing boxes. She told me we were leaving that same day. Within an hour we were in her car, driving away from home. We passed Uncle Pete's Pizza. I realized this was the first Friday in my life that we weren't eating from there. As we drove further away from the sea, and I saw outside of that small town for the first time, I already knew that leaving our life behind would not fix anything. Sandra is still out there. I hope somebody can find it. Listen, I know what I'm about to say will sound crazy. And trust me, if it wasn't for the fact that I experienced this firsthand, I wouldn't even believe it. But the truth is, I did experience this, and what I'm saying is true, and something like this happened. All I ask is that whoever reads this heeds my warning and doesn't end up like me. It was about 9 weeks ago that I moved into my new house. It was a little bit out of town and surrounded by the woods, but it was cheap, so I thought it was a good steal. How wrong I was. If I could go back, I would never have gotten the house. Sorry, I'm getting off track. Anyways, the house was in pretty good shape and more than enough room for me since I live alone. The owner who was selling it did act a little weird and even had an almost pity look in their eyes when I agreed to buy it. When they showed me the house, they remarked, "You know, if I was you, I wouldn't live out here so close to the woods." I shrugged off their comment to them just trying to make a joke. Little did I know they were trying to warn me. After I bought the house, I had all my stuff moved in, and for the first 4 days of living there I had no problems. The house was everything I wanted. That was until the 5th night came around. I got home from work around 11 p.m. I work an evening shift from about 3 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. and was getting ready for bed. I had laid down in bed and was just drifting off when I heard what sounded like a mountain lion screaming. While it did sound off, I brushed it off, seeing as how they do frequent the area and I do live near the woods. This, however, would occur every night. Sometimes the screaming would last 5 minutes and sometimes it would last up to 12 minutes. Sometimes the screaming would stop and then start up 30 minutes to an hour later. After 2 weeks of living there, the sound of claws scratching against my house and windows would occur with the screaming. I had gotten enough of it and decided to check around my house the next morning. Upon inspection the next morning, I confirmed there was something outside my house. There were claw marks that varied in depth and looked really rugged. Whatever it was has very uneven claws. I called the local wildlife services and had them come take a look. They inspected the marks and listened to what I had to say about my sleepless nights and came to the conclusion that it was a mountain lion, possibly one with rabies, seeing as how it is so comfortable being near human life. I was advised to not go outside at all at night to avoid possible confrontation with it. They assured me they would do their best to capture it. I appreciated their help. I thought that after that, everything would go back to normal, but that was just the start of it. For a few nights after that, I didn't have any problems with the mountain lion, but everything quickly escalated after just 4 nights. That night, it came back, but it had prey as well. I heard the prey scream as the mountain lion killed it. It was so close I swore I could hear the sound of its bones breaking, skin tearing, and flesh being ripped off it. The thought and image of that made my stomach turn, and I rushed to the bathroom to throw up. I couldn't get back to sleep, so I waited till morning to go out and check out what exactly happened. Knowing what I know now, I should have taken that as a warning. In the morning, I checked the backside of my house, which faced the woods, and right where my bedroom window is, there was a big pool of almost dried blood with some pieces of flesh, fur, and bone. Holding my mouth and forcing my bile back down, I followed the blood trail that led towards the woods. Just a little bit into the woods, I discovered what was left of the prey. It was completely mutilated, so much so I couldn't tell what it was. Its guts were strewn out with some pieces of fur covering some parts. There were some bones, including what looked to be a bitten in half skull. I couldn't take it anymore and turned and dry heaved. Luckily, I hadn't eaten anything so far. I felt sick to my stomach, so I called into work to get the day off, then called the wildlife services. Once they got to my house, I showed them what I discovered. Even though they looked sick to the stomach, they cleaned up the poor animal. After that, they checked the area, and upon not finding anything left, but told me to call again if there was anything else like this. Stuff like this continued on for another 3 weeks. Sometimes I would find dead animals from the mountain lion's late night snack, or I would find more claw marks on my house or in the ground. I even started feeling like I was being watched by something. You can call me crazy all you like, but I was and still am convinced that it knew what it was doing, and it did what it did to torment me. Over the 3 weeks, my mental and physical health suffered. I would even start to hallucinate that there was something in my house, but upon further inspection there would be nothing there. I didn't sleep much, started to eat less, and my performance at work was horrible. I had finally had enough and wanted to confront this mountain lion. I was convinced it wasn't a mountain lion, but something worse. And against my better judgment, I wanted to face it and kill it. This was the biggest mistake of my life. When night came, I grabbed my flashlight, my shotgun shells, and headed out into the dark night. As I walked farther into the woods, I could hear both distant and close sounds of twigs snapping and the sound of growls. I shivered in cold fear, but my determination commanded my legs to move forward. I continued on, but soon heard those inhuman screams. They sent chills down my spine and made me stop dead in my tracks. The screams were so close and so loud they pierced my ears. Off to my left, I could hear the bushes rustling. Thankfully, I snapped to my senses and dodged out of the way as something jumped at me. Although I didn't get fully out of the way, it still managed to cut my side just a little. Even though it was just scratched, it hurt so badly, burned like fire, and wouldn't stop bleeding. Holding my elbow against my wound, I focused my flashlight where it had disappeared back into the bushes and shakily put the shotgun shells in my shotgun. I saw movement and aimed and shot. I figured it wouldn't hit it with how fast it was moving, but the damn thing started laughing. It was guttural, deep, animalistic, and human all at one time. The laughter echoed out among the trees. That was enough to make my fear win my body over, and I took off running towards my house. I didn't realize I had walked in so deep, but apparently I had. I heard it chasing me, still laughing. I was its prey, and it was just playing with me as it hunted me down. What did I possibly think I could have done to something as evil and horrible as it? Why the fuck didn't the previous house owner warn me? These thoughts kept going through my mind as I ran as fast as I could. I would trip over tree roots that hadn't been there before, but my determination to not let it get any closer kept me upright and running. I finally saw the tree line edge and rejoiced. I knew I could get to the safety of my house. Just as I got to the edge, a clawed hand grabbed my leg and yanked. I screamed as I felt my leg break. I rolled onto my back and saw the thing right over me. It was big, possibly 9 feet, about 2.7 meters tall. It had all the features of an animal, but it also had human features. It looked like a mix of a wolf, deer, and a human. It even had some vines on it. And it smelled like death. Just what the hell was this thing? It leaned down over me, and I saw its horrendous, unnatural smile full of razor-sharp and long teeth. I turned my head away, looking for my shotgun. It was a little far from my hands. If I could reach it, I might have a chance. It laughed, snarled, and growled, scoping me out. Seeing my reaction, getting joy from it. Thankfully, that allowed me to reach my shotgun. I grabbed it and had it loaded. It leaned a little farther back and grabbed my face. Right then I positioned the shotgun and shot it right in the head. It screamed and fell back. I struggled up and half limped, half ran back to my house. I locked all the doors and windows and took cover in my closet. I could hear it moving around outside. It called for me in an almost human voice, but I wouldn't be fooled. Finally, the sun came and I could no longer hear it. I struggled to walk to my phone and call 911. I had no idea what I could say, so I told them I was attacked by a mountain lion. The ambulance, police, and wildlife services showed up. I was taken to the hospital and had my wounds and broken leg attended to. The police asked many questions, but I gave the bare minimum of answers and lied about some. I mean, who would believe me that something like that monster attacked me? Once I was released, I went back to that house, packed my stuff, and left. As I left the house, I saw it standing among the tree line, just watching me go. I floored the gas and I never looked back. I contacted the county later and told them that the house is inhabitable to anyone and asked for it to be destroyed. After much convincing, they agreed, only because the previous house owner stepped up and confirmed it. I wanted to be mad at the previous house owner, but I couldn't. They dealt with that stuff longer than me. Well, that's my story. I'm writing this from a hotel room to warn everyone that reads this, don't buy a house for cheap, especially if it is near the woods. You might just experience something similar to I. Stay safe out there, people. Reality is truly scarier than fiction. The night was indifferent like the wind before a storm. My mind wandered from the upcoming school day to Miss Poe's new puppy. I sat in my room, dwindling away at some homework while rain battered against my window. Thunder erupted overhead as lightning flashed outside. I paused my writing to look outside into the dreary night. I faintly heard the creaking of steps echoing, the rhythm of the thunder. A knock rang from my door. Jay, honey, your father and I have something to talk to you about. I promptly stood from my desk and walked to my door, and upon opening it, I encountered my parents, possessing happy expressions on their faces. My eyes darted between their exuberant faces. What is it? Your father and I have finally deemed that you have come of age and can participate in something important to this family. Please follow, my mother responded. Okay, I said as I went down the stairs, following their footsteps. They led me to the foreboding door of the basement. I couldn't help the nervousness that ran through my body. My parents always forbade me from going into the basement, but now they have led me to it. My father opened the brooding door and descended deeper down. My mother encouraged me to follow after him as she followed behind me. I instantly noticed that the basement did not smell pleasant. In fact, it had an oxidized smell to it. I ignored the smell and tried to mimic the same happiness my parents possessed. There was no reason for my unease if my parents were this excited. We reached the bottom, and upon my father turning the lights on, my eyes widened in disgust as they darted around the sight before me, taking snippets of a more gruesome whole. My stomach churned as my body revolted and turned from the cut-up body parts of people to the smiles plastered on my parents' faces. We wanted to have you join us sooner, but we needed you to mature more so you could understand, my father said with a terrifying calmness in his voice. I don't understand. How could I ever understand this? I said as I felt my breathing become labored. Immediately, the air around us became chilling as if ice coated our bodies, and the smiles fell from my parents' lips. Their eyes narrowed upon me, and they brooded as if I was nothing more than an insect they could crush with any sudden desire of the soul. What the hell happened to my once cheerful parents who would never do something like this? Fear became my captor, and despite my mind racing, I could not find the strength to move. Jay, these sacrifices we make to our God will usher the world into a new era of harmony. Imagine a world where only a few of those who are blind to the Almighty will have to be sacrificed for the prosperity and happiness of their brothers and sisters. When it comes to the happiness of the majority, there is no need for concern for the minority. My mother said with a fervent voice filled with reverence for this God she spoke of. Jay, we wanted you to be a part of something greater, that is why we revealed it to you. However, if you do not wish to see, our hands will be forced to pry your eyes open for you. My father spoke coldly, as if he was a different man than the one I once knew. I gulped as a million thoughts rushed through my mind in a messy concave like a running river. I had to survive and escape, but the only way to do that was to appease my parents. If I could fool them for just a bit, I would be able to escape later and go to the police. I smiled as I steeled my quivering lips. You're right. If it is for the happiness of the majority, then why not sacrifice a few? Even though I didn't believe a single syllable I just spoke, I could not help the disgust that those words riled from within me. My parents' faces lit up once more as the tension in the air lightened. My mother hugged me. I knew you'd understand. Now, to show your dedication to the Almighty, you must also make a sacrifice. My blood ran cold as my eyes widened once more. My parents led my numbed body to a separate room where they had a girl strapped onto a table. Once she saw my parents, the girl began to struggle against her confines. She looked in my eyes, her own seemingly asking for help. I could not help but to turn away. It was either her or I. I knew if I tried to help her, my parents would just kill us both. Even though I knew that, it didn't make this any easier. My parents positioned me beside the girl and handed me a long, sharp knife. Plunge the knife deep into her heart to make the sacrifice. Her pain will only be momentary, my father said as if he was speaking of squashing a spider. I raised the knife high above my head. I turned to my parents and saw their eager expressions, urging me to go continue. I looked back at the girl and nodded slightly. She stopped struggling as if accepting her death. My parents held themselves with bated breaths, awaiting my strike. However, they had no time to react as I slashed at them both with the knife. They fell back with shrieks of pain. I hurriedly cut the straps off the girl and helped her up. Jay, you ungrateful brat. How dare you do this to your parents? My mother screeched at me. I grabbed the girl's hand and led her out of the basement. My parents were running up the steps as I closed the basement door and locked it. I heard their shouts of insults towards me as I rushed towards a phone, dialing 911 in a panic frenzy. 911, do you need police, fire, or medical? The operator asked. I looked at the state of the girl. Police and medical. Okay, what is the address of the emergency? 435 Grover Street. My parents are trying to kill me and this girl I'm with. Please hurry. They are locked in my basement, but I don't know how long that will hold them. I said urgently. Okay, and what is the name of your parents? Robert and Eleanor Carter. All right, please stay on the phone with me until the police arrive. They have been dispatched to your location. Please try to find a place to hide. What is your name so I can relay that to the police as well? The voice on the other end continued to try and coax me as she inquired. Jay Carter. Okay, Jay, take the girl you're with and hide somewhere safe. Remember to stay on the phone with me. When the police arrive, they will call out for you, she continued. Okay. I grabbed the girl's arm and ran up the stairs and into my room. I locked my door and went to the bathroom. Jay, what is the girl's name? Hey, what's your name? I turned to the girl. Rachel Pierce, she responded. Her name is Rachel Pierce. Okay, and Jay, how did you find her? I quickly summarized everything that had happened till this point to her. Okay, are y'all in a safe place now? Yes, we are in my bathroom, which is only accessible through my room. The bathroom has a window if we need to get out, I said. The operator was about to ask something else until we heard a shout resounding from downstairs. Jay, come out from where you're hiding. My father yelled at the top of his lungs. What's that? The operator asked. My parents, they broke free from the basement, I answered. Rachel began crying as she sat down on the floor. It'll be okay. I tried to calm her. She nodded her head and covered her mouth, but more tears fell from her eyes. I could hear my parents walking up the steps. How much longer until the officers get here? They are a few minutes out. Please stay where you are and remain quiet, the operator said. Fuck that. I responded as I handed the phone to Rachel. I pried the window open and grabbed the phone back from Rachel just as I heard my parents beating on my bedroom door. "Hurry, Rachel, but be careful. The drop isn't far, so jump if need be," I said in a rush. Rachel climbed out the window and descended as careful and quickly as she possibly could. I heard the sound of my bedroom door break open. My parents began slamming against my bathroom door. I went to climb out the window when the bathroom door busted open. I felt strong hands pull me back, and I turned around to face my father. He had a hatchet in one hand. He tried swinging it down onto my head, but I resisted and caught the handle. "Honey, the sacrifice escaped outside. Go get her," my father said, and my mother nodded. "No." I struggled to try and get out. She just ignored me and quickly left. My father continued pressing the hatchet down, and I felt overpowered. I gritted my teeth as I tried pushing back. "You brought this upon yourself. If you had only joined your mother and I, this wouldn't have had to happen," my father shouted. I heard sirens and smiled. "What? You mean being a deranged killer like you?" Fury flashed in his eyes. "We're trying to create a world of peace." With this outburst, the strength he was exerting had a momentary lapse, and I was able to push back. I faintly heard the sounds of multiple people running up the stairs and into my room. "Mr. Carter, drop the weapon or we will shoot you," an officer said, but my father ignored them and pushed me towards the window. I tripped and fell out of it halfway. I looked back up to see him rush towards the cops and gunshots followed. His body dropped to the floor as a cop rushed over to help me up. "Are you all right?" I nodded. "I think. What about Rachel?" "She is safe. Your mother didn't comply and was shot as well." I sighed in relief as I felt exhaustion overtake me. I collapsed as my vision went black. I woke up later at the hospital. An officer was standing in my room when he noticed I was up. "Jay Carter, I'm Officer Black with the Grant County Police Department. Could you tell me what happened?" Officer Black said. I nodded and told him everything. "This happened a few years ago. I haven't touched any technology after what happened until now. So, I've been using technology since I was a kid. At 12, I learned how to write scripts and programs to hack into systems, and ever since, I was hooked. Fast forward, I'm in second year university. I'm now quite good at hacking, albeit somewhat cocky. Throughout high school, I made a lot of money hacking. People would come to me normally to recover their hacked social media accounts or to hack into their boyfriend's phone to read their text messages. I was known as the guy to go to if you wanted something hacked. Even my school occasionally came to me for help if some script kiddie shut down the school's website with low-orbit ion cannon. Like I said, I made a lot of money doing this through high school. Halfway through my second year of university, I started getting bored of this. The money was good, but there was no thrill. One of my friends told me about this cool thing called the dark web. I had heard of the dark web before, but it never seemed that interesting. My friend told me how it was full of drugstores, weapons dealers, hackers for hire, and a bunch of fucked up animal and child porn. As a hacker and a stone of the dark web seemed right up my alley. When I got home that day, I fired up my computer and did some quick Googling. With my vast knowledge of technology, it didn't take me long to get set up with Tor and Tails installed on my computer. I sped through the hidden wiki, finding most of the websites boring or dead. I texted my friend asking if he had any interesting link directories. He replied, "Here are a few of the ones I use." He sent me about 5 links to directories. I decided to click the second one and see what I could find. I scrolled through the directory for a few minutes. He was right about how interesting the dark web was. I couldn't figure out where to start, so I clicked on a chat room. The website looked old and primitive, but surprisingly there was one person online. I started talking to him. He seemed kind of shady, but it was better than scrolling through a bunch of dead websites. He said he'd been on the dark web for a while. Finally finding someone with a vast knowledge of what's on the dark web, I asked him if he had any interesting links. He sent me a link, then immediately left the website. I had no idea what was hidden behind the link. Looking back on it, oh God, I wish I hadn't clicked it. At the time, my own curiosity overwhelmed me, and I clicked the link without giving it a second thought. After it finally loaded, due to Tor's notoriously slow loading time, I was presented with a pop-up box. It said in red text, "If you don't know what's next, you're probably in the wrong place." There were two buttons, continue and leave. I instantly clicked continue. The biggest mistake of my life. It brought up a black screen page with a blood-red title at the top of the screen, The Freak Show. In the middle of the screen there was a chat box. A message popped up from someone titled admin. He said hello. I said, "Hello, interesting website you've got here." He replied, "Thank you. Are you here to view the show?" I thought to myself, what show? Out of curiosity, I replied with yes. He said, "Since you're a first-time viewer, it will cost you $500 via Bitcoin in order to view the show. Future viewings are free." From all the money I made hacking, I had enough to fuel my curiosity, so I went ahead and paid the $500. After paying him, I was surprised. I was given a .zip file instead of a link. I had developed a custom-made antivirus that appeared to work well, so I risked downloading it. When I unzipped the folder, there were two files inside, an installer and a file named readme.txt. I started by opening the text file. It just said, "Do not send the installer to anyone, or else." I went ahead and closed the text file and opened the installer. It took about 15 minutes to install, which is strange for my computer. After installing, it opened up automatically. Across the screen it said, "Hello, welcome to the Freak Show. We use a custom program for our streams instead of live streaming on Tor due to Tor being too slow. We also need the extra security." After about 10 seconds, the screen changed to a countdown with a chat room next to it. At this point, I was starting to feel that whatever happened next would not be good. The timer displayed that there were 30 minutes until the stream started. I set my screen name to James Kent 157, not my real name, but I needed an alias. I said hi in chat, but was ignored. I waited the 30 minutes, and after the timer hit 0, a video feed began. On the screen there was a guy in a mask with 3 people side by side in front of him. He started speaking with a voice changer to mask his voice. He said, "Welcome to the 26th stream of the Freak Show. We are happy to see all our old viewers and a few new ones. We will now randomly choose who gets to choose who to kill first and how to kill them." At that point I realized I was fucked. I was in too much shock to close the window. I watched as the feed turned into a bunch of names scrolling by until it landed on someone named Gore725. I watched as he made his commands. First stab him in the kneecaps, then cut off his fingers. After that, gouge his eyeballs. When that's finished, drill into his stomach, and to finish him off, burn him with hot metal. I watched as the sicko did all of this. I watched as the victim screamed in pain. After everything was done, he said, "Now for the next one." After he said that, I snapped out of it and went to close the page. When I clicked on the exit, it said, "Sorry, no leaving midstream." I was trapped. The wheel popped up again, but this time it landed on me. I couldn't respond. Instead, I typed in chat, "You sick fucks. Why are you doing this?" I was met with all the people in chat calling me things like pussy, dumbass, retard. I then said, I'm calling the police. I shouldn't have said that. The owner of the site said, call the police and you'll be in next week's stream. Logan. That made my heart freeze. He knew my real name. He then pasted my parents' names, my address, school, age, and IP in chat. I immediately went to Task Manager to close Tor in the program. As soon as Task Manager opened, it said not responding. The guy said, don't try that in chat. I pulled the plug on my computer without a doubt. My screen went black. I ran to my parents' room, told them what happened, and said we had to move. They believed me and called the police. The police took care of everything and put us under police protection. Within a few months, they found the website owner. He was a 32-year-old man who lived off a combination of welfare and the money he made from his red room. It was many years later before I finally started using technology again. The dark web is an abyss of terrible things. If you're smart, you'll stay on the surface web. But I can't control what you do. It all started when I made a new friend. We will say her name is Jennifer. Jennifer and I became best friends, although it was kinda weird because she was the really popular, pretty girl in school and I was known as the lonely, creepy outcast of the school. Anyways, we would spend all of our time together at school, and to be honest, I started developing feelings for her. We would skip class together and find any excuse to meet up during school, but for some reason, she was always too busy after school and on weekends. I thought she liked me too, until she started dating the biggest, most muscular jock I've ever seen, ever. Like I'm talking, his arms were the size of sculpted milk jugs. Now I know what you might be thinking. Is the writer of this going to stalk this girl? And the answer is no. After remaining friends for a few months longer, she told me I was too depressing to be around and told me to kill myself. But that's another story that I will tell another day. It ties into the stalker story because the stalker showed up after she told me that. I very vividly remember the first night it happened. Those eyeballs looking through the living room window at 3 a.m. while I'm playing on my PC. Hearthstone, if y'all were wondering what I was playing, I turn my head and I see these two eyes in the window. I remember thinking, is that just my reflection? And then I got up and walked closer. Mind you, I'm in my boxers at 3 a.m. home alone. So I get closer and the eyes blinked. They blinked, and as I got right up to the window, the flash of a camera went off and the eyes were gone. Fast forward about 2 weeks after that fateful night, I had to change my boxers. I'm in class. Now in my class, Jennifer from earlier in the story is sitting behind me. Her huge protein-packed boyfriend is sitting next to her. I can hear them whispering behind me. I kinda feel bad for him. I understand why you told me to tell him to leave me alone, but he looks so miserable. It's okay. I feel bad too now, but he was bringing you down, and you're happier now. I'm sure he will be okay. Yeah, I hope so. But he should have a new friend soon, as long as the new girl in the back of the class keeps staring at him. Now don't get me wrong, Jennifer and her boyfriend weren't bad people. They may seem like it, but in all honesty, I was in a rough place, so I'm sorta glad she ended up getting happier with someone she truly loved. It was the new girl comment that got to me. New girl? What new girl? I don't see any. Wait, why does she look familiar? And for some crazy reason, it didn't click in my brain. I didn't make the connection, yet. Fast forward a month. I've started noticing someone drawing my name inside hearts on desks and tables and even on my locker at school. I didn't know whether to feel weirded out or to feel good, knowing someone actually thought that I was worth liking. Now I needed to know who it was. That weekend, I went to a friend's house. It's about midnight on a Saturday, and me and my friend saved up enough money for a pack of cigarettes. It was a pack of Newports. And it was too cold outside to smoke, so we went into the bathroom, turned on the fan, and started to smoke. About halfway through my cig, I could have sworn I heard someone giggling quietly. My first thought was, how the hell is he laughing and smoking like at the same time? And then he points it out. He says, "Why do you keep giggling?" I told him probably about 100 times it wasn't me. We then heard a crash in the living room. We both rushed out. There was nobody there, but the back door was wide open. We look at each other, and then I run, shut and lock the back door, and then we barricade ourselves in his room. 2 days later, I get a text from an unknown number. It's a picture of a girl with her face scribbled out, standing in my friend's living room 2 days before. Now I was scared. I didn't know what or why this was happening to me. I showed my friend the picture and he says I know her. I went wide-eyed and asked who it was. He replies, "Isn't that the girl who came to our school not too long ago? I can tell by that jacket." I told him that there's no way of knowing that based of a jacket, but then he starts laughing. I asked what's so funny, and he says, "Remember that girl I used to date back in middle school that you met one time because she was from another school? That's her." He just keeps laughing and laughing. At this point, I'm just dumbfounded. Not at the fact that it's his ex, but that she found out where I live and took pictures of me. The next day, Tuesday at school, I confront her. I ask her why she was stalking me, and she just looks at me, clearly having no clue what I'm talking about. She claims she doesn't even know me. The stalker wasn't her. At this point, I didn't know what to do. I started staying in my room more, which has no windows, and locking the door. Nothing happened for a while. I thought I was free. But that's when I found it. A note in my room saying, "Why do you try and hide from me? I just want you to love me as much as I love you. Just accept me. Meet me on the football field at 9 p.m. on Sunday." I did what any curiously terrified person would do. I didn't call the police. I went to the football field. Turns out the stalker, whom of which was a girl, was one of Jennifer's ex-best friends who knew me from conversations she had with Jennifer. Guess she thought me and her were the same, and that the girl we trusted betrayed us both, so we were destined to be together. At this point, I didn't know what to do. I didn't freak out. I just stood there, and she hugged me and told me she knows my pain, the depression, the hate from others. She told me it's okay. And then she ran off. I just stood there not knowing what to say or do, and I never saw her again, never got any more notes or pictures or anything. The scariest part, when I asked Jennifer about her. Apparently, Jennifer's so-called ex-best friend didn't exist. Jennifer didn't know the girl, and neither did I. Have you ever thought of death before? Go ahead, think of it right now. Maybe you'll think of a loved one that recently passed away. Maybe you'll think of those aunts you used to so magnanimously bully as a young child before the concept of death had fully become understood. Or, just maybe, you'll think of your own death. Maybe images will flash through your mind of experiencing a mugging gone wrong in an alley or a freak accident on a roller coaster. Or maybe, if you're crazy enough, you'll think of taking your own life. Now, go ahead and think about something else, like your reason you decided to look at this for. Well, are you doing it? Was it the title? A mistake? Sheer luck? Or did you just randomly decide this one story amongst the others? Or we can make it more simple, like the last thing you ate and why? Was that bowl of Cinnamon Toast Crunch worth the sheer amount of sugar in it? Maybe not. Whatever the case, your mind managed to switch focus and you're no longer preoccupied thinking about death, right? How amazing that must feel. Who am I? Honestly, I'm not too sure sometimes, as I'm a man of two minds, and one of them is truly ugly. What I am confident about is that I grew up in circumstances I would never wish upon another human. Needless to say, death has been part of my mind ever since I was 9, which happened to be the first and last time I ever attempted to end my own life. After that, it stayed with me in one form or another, sometimes a contingency plan, sometimes a reminder of what I stood for, but more often than not, as an escape the escape. After the worst period of my life, where I went about as insane as a political person high off LSD, I managed to let go of my anger towards life. I was no longer a nihilist, no longer anti-religious, and finally no longer depressed. I became very spiritual, managed to meditate with absolute precision, and never felt the urge to go back to drugs ever again. My whole life remained basically unchanged for the final year I lived in that dungeon before college, yet my mind was as clear as it could ever be. Sometimes, it seemed I was genuinely as happy as a spoiled rich kid with everything they ever wanted. There was just one catch. When I first noticed it, I thought of it as nothing more than some sort of after effect of being in hell for so long. I'd be hanging out with friends having a blast, until one of them would mention something like guns or heights. I would immediately feel an odd shift in my mood because my mind would single out these sorts of topics and ruminate about them. I'd excuse myself, creating whatever excuse I could to leave the current environment I was in and go somewhere that I could be alone for a while. I'd continue to just think about death, how simple it could be, how easy it was. Soon enough, I would seem to fall into a sort of trance, with the everlasting pull of ending my own life cycling through my mind over and over. I'd stop thinking about anything else and would sometimes become catatonic. Just one problem. I did not have a reason to continue thinking about death anymore, but as if parts of my mind mutated, it had been with me so long that eventually I noticed these episodes had warning signs, those ruminating moments whenever I was reminded of death. As I started noticing these precursor episodes, I started fighting through them. They could last as short as 5 minutes or as long as 30. I would have maybe up to 10 of these every day, and they became something I did not look forward to. I'd walk next to a parked police car and have visions of me smashing into the car and stealing whatever weapons were inside. I would be talking to my friends in their dorms, only to glance at the window behind them to the ghostly figure hovering outside the window. My attention towards them would trail off, their voice becoming garbled and distorted, and I'd feel this urge to run towards the window as fast as possible. I was already a master at hiding my issues and emotions from others. Oh boy, didn't that bite me in the ass. The episodes grew in frequency, eventually happening once a week, usually on Saturdays. My ethereal mind of happiness and resilience would be dragged into the void whenever one occurred, as if my self-awareness would vanish during them. Once they started, it seemed only when the day ended and I finally went to sleep did the episode 2 go to sleep. Why won't these stop? I nearly yelled at my therapist, whom at this point had a very concerned look on her face. So you're absolutely positive you're not at any risk of hurting yourself? I wasn't fazed, understanding completely how crazy I sounded. Yes, in fact, I'd say I'm at the lowest risk that I've ever been. In my mind, I'm happier than I've ever been, so why do I still want to do it? I had asked her so many times in the past about mental conditions I could have, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and even for a short while did research on DID, but she insisted they didn't fit the criteria for those, and she was right. I was so desperate I began questioning my own mind if I was truly as happy as I thought I was. But this time, my therapist maintained eye contact with me as if she had waited for this moment as long as I had, and pulled out her phone. "You're not pulling out the DSM-5? She looked down at her phone and began searching something up, the white screen too blinding from my angle to get a good look at it. No, because this isn't in the DSM-5. As she slowly turned the phone towards me, my eyes slowly read the phrase on the screen. Suicidal OCD. She handed me her phone as I began reading about the unofficial subtype, and we both stayed in silence until I broke it, still staring at her phone. My God, it all makes sense. So there's no way out of this? She quickly responded. Of course they are, but they may fall under more general treatments. We tried everything, from simple techniques to DBT therapy to medication for OCD. Eventually we even tried electroshock therapy. My symptoms improved drastically. I kept giving my therapist great news, because that's what she wanted to hear. In reality, the nagging voice only grew louder over time, with each treatment proving insufficient. I assure you though, I am as clear as I've ever been, because my darkest secret is one I've never shared to anyone until today. I stole a gun from one of my friends. It happened to be fully loaded. What an idiot, am I right? Don't worry, I didn't steal it for the reason you're thinking of. I waited until it came the demons. They poked out of my closet, phased through the ceiling, and glared at my body as I was out of it in the midst of an episode. I pulled the gun out and stared into the barrel. It would be so easy. It's so close, so just one shot and... Well, if it is so easy, then maybe I could go another day, just to see if tomorrow makes today worth it. I glanced up at the demons. They slowly retreated back to where they appeared from. The hands that had grasped my arms and chest slowly receded back into the bed, and I casually put the gun away and fell asleep. My town of Allendale was small and rural, surrounded by beautiful scenery and a never-ending forest. It wasn't uncommon to pick up hitchhikers. They were mostly college students or solo travelers traveling the east, but lately, our hitchhikers were going missing and their bodies washed up by the river. We had a serial killer in Allendale, a town where everyone knew everyone. So far, 9 hitchhikers had gone missing. All males. All between the ages of 19 to 35. My poor little town was in fear, its people looking behind their shoulders every minute and rushing home before the sun set. Crazy what's happening out there, huh? Lolly, the pudgy, middle-aged waitress at Flo's diner, asked. Whitney and I exchanged scared glances. We couldn't even catch a late-night flick at the movie theater anymore. Allendale was under curfew. Everyone had to be home by 8 o'clock or they'd spend the night in jail. Can't believe there's real sickos out there. To think there's one right here, Whitney answered. Lolly sighed, her double chin pressing into her chest slightly. There are sick men out there, girls. A woman can never be too safe. We're about to lock up for curfew. You girls got a ride home? Whitney and I nodded. She's driving, I replied. Bye, Aunt Lolly. Whitney waved. You girls get on home safely. Chloe, tell your folks I said hello. I smiled and waved back. I will. Thanks, Lolly. The cold, Virginian air nipped at my face as we walked back to the car. Whitney quickly turned on the heater, blowing out short puffs of air as she tried to get warm. It was the dead of winter, and although we never got snow, it got deadly cold, especially for hitchhikers walking through the frigid night. Think we'll see any? I feel terrible for them, Whitney said. I don't know, but police say someone picking up hitchhikers are killing them, but what if a hitchhiker is killing them? I asked. Whitney sighed. Yeah, you're right. Who knows? We drove through the sunset, blasting Taylor Swift on the radio. Living in such a small town, this was all Whitney and I did. Drive to Flo's diner for free dinner and sometimes catch a movie if they were any good. On the drive home, we'd listen to Taylor Swift. Yeah, boring, I know, but I wouldn't change these moments for anything. "Aw, crap," Whitney muttered as a hitchhiker flagged us down. He looked to be in his early 20s, barely covered in clothing suitable enough for the late night weather, and his nose was bright red from the cold. We stopped and I rolled down my window. "Don't you know there's a killer out here?" I asked. "The hell are you doing out here?" "Sorry for holding y'all up. I got lost hiking and couldn't make it back to my cabin in time for curfew. Mind giving me a lift back? Couple pretty things like yourselves don't look like butchers." He smiled, blue eyes staring at me flirtatiously. I blushed and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "Hop in." I could feel Whitney glare at me, but she sighed heavily and took off driving as soon as he buckled in. "What's your name?" she asked him. "Kyle." "Thanks for the ride. I appreciate it." "No problem." "I'm Whitney, she's Chloe." I said nothing as they kept talking. Through the rear-view mirror, I saw Kyle toying with something in his pocket and looking behind him every couple minutes. A sick feeling bubbled in the pit of my stomach. Maybe we shouldn't have picked this guy up. Whitney must have noticed because she cracked a smile and said, "Don't worry. There's no killer behind us. You're safe." And then it happened too fast. Kyle had a gun to her head. "But you're not." Whitney gasped, nearly slamming on the brakes until he pressed it further into her temple. "Keep driving, sweetheart. Wouldn't want anything to happen to that pretty face of yours." She started crying, mascara running down her rosy red cheeks. "Please, please, don't hurt us. We'll take you wherever you want. You can take the car, just please don't." "Shut up," he roared. "Didn't your mother ever tell you not to pick up a hitchhiker?" I pulled my gun from the passenger side compartment and pressed it to his throat. "I don't know. Didn't yours ever tell you not to get into a car with a stranger?" Kyle's face paled. Whitney smirked, all traces of her tears gone. That was a special talent she had, being able to cry on command. Kyle's hand trembled and Whitney quickly knocked it out of his hand before he could even pull the trigger. "No. No. They said the killer was a man," he stuttered. "They were wrong," I mocked. "We're not all bad, Kyle. We don't kill for fun. We only kill those who take advantage of our kindness." Two pretty girls offering to take someone home. Some made it home safely. Others didn't. You won't. Didn't you find it strange how we didn't ask you for directions, Kyle? Whitney giggled. We just kept driving and you didn't suspect a single thing. Help. Help. Someone please help me. He screamed at the top of his lungs. Whitney giggled again. Don't be silly. Nobody can hear you up here. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please just let me out. I won't tell anyone, please. He pleaded. I smiled lowly. Too late. Stupid hitchhikers, I muttered as we watched Kyle's lifeless body float down the river. Think they'll ever catch us? Whitney asked. I shrugged. Who cares? Nothing better to do in this town anyway. Might as well get rid of some lowlives. She sighed. That's 10 down. Maybe we should stop, Chloe. Yeah, maybe. The drive back was silent. No small talk and no Taylor Swift music. The sun has already set and it was 7:45 o'clock. As we drove down the highway, another hitchhiker appeared. He seemed hesitant at first until he noticed we were female, then stuck out his thumb. Whitney pulled over and the older man grinned nervously at us. "Evening. You girls mind giving me a lift home before curfew?" I smiled. "Sure. Hop in." The things living in my house are not my real family. They look and sound like them, but I'm sure they're not. I know it sounds crazy, but hear me out. It all started a few weeks ago. I awoke from deep sleep to my mom standing over my bed with a hot stack of fresh pancakes. "Happy Sweet 16" was written in blue icing on top. "Happy birthday, Jonathan. I figured I'd make something a little extra sweet for you on your special day," Mom said. I was bewildered. First of all, it wasn't my birthday. I celebrated my birthday 2 months back. I'm a Virgo, and it was well into Libra season. Secondly, I ate pancakes with a passion. "Is this a joke?" I said. "Mom, you know my birthday was a few months ago." She stared blankly at me for a moment as if she were looking through me. Then she broke out into a loud, uncharacteristic cackle. "That's a good one, honey," she said. "I'm your mother. I birthed you. I think I would remember what day that was." She set the pancakes on my bedside dresser and left my room. At first, I was worried she had suffered a stroke or some kind of fugue state, but over the next couple of weeks, there were more weird incidences. Some were benign enough, like my unathletic father insisting he was a marathon runner, my unartistic mom transforming our guest room into an art studio, or my sister repeatedly calling the dog the wrong name. Other incidents were more serious, like when my father, who insists that pepperoni is the only acceptable pizza topping, ordered pineapple instead. I stopped trying to correct them because the same thing happened every time. They gave me a strange, empty look for a moment, then a chuckle, a pat on the head, and an insistence that I was mistaken. It started to take its toll on me as I grew increasingly wary of my family. I'm a naturally skeptical person, so I figured there had to be some explanation I could find on the internet. Then, in an obscure medical journal, I stumbled on the entry for Capgras syndrome, a condition where the subject believes those around them have been body snatched and replaced. Bingo! Ironically, this set me at ease. Sure, I might be nuts, but at least there was some natural explanation. That was until things got even weirder. A rash appeared on my foot that I couldn't sate with ointment, and I discovered little pinpricks inside my armpits. Sometimes I would awake with my body red and hot all over, almost like an excruciating sunburn that I could feel deep in my bones. After these incidences, I would awake confused and less familiar with my surroundings. My bookcase was in the wrong place, my clothes had been replaced, and my family's behavior was nearly unrecognizable. These tiny mutilations continued until I awoke one morning from another dreamless sleep to find a cut behind my ear. It wasn't some tiny scratch, but an incision that had been sutured. I could feel a small piece of metal or something just underneath my skin. I had finally had enough. I couldn't explain any of this away by blaming my head. I was certain imposters had taken over my home, and I wouldn't let them get away with it. I set up a series of cameras around my house to capture the activity going on that next night. I nervously succumbed to light sleep, but was awoken by a loud thud on the roof hours later. I scrambled to my computer to check the surveillance equipment. I toddled through the cameras in each room of our large house until I came upon my sister. She stood stock still in the kitchen, eyes glazed over like she was in a trance. I could barely make out a shadowy figure in the corner of the screen before it hurried into the other room. Next, I switched to the hallway monitors. My father was talking to something off camera. My blood ran cold as a pale, spindly creature stepped into view. It had its back to the camera, but I could make out 2 tentacles for arms and 2 legs which seemed impossibly slender. They were pallid and smooth head to toe with few identifiable features, almost like Gumby, but with a large bulbous head. Its legs did not bend, so its gait was uneven and clumsy as it shuffled toward my father. Its tentacle glowed as he raised it to my father's forehead. Moments later, my father went into a glassy-eyed trance, just like my sister. I toddled to the main bedroom to find another one of the creatures doing the same to my mother lying in bed. I panicked and leaped up from my computer, hell-bent on jumping out my window and making a break for it. However, as I turned, I was faced with one of the creatures looming over me. The creature had large, black eyes that took up most of its face and a small, thin-lipped mouth. I wasn't scared as it raised its glowing tentacle to my forehead. Instead, I felt a warm light envelop me before everything went black. I awoke in a pristinely white room strapped to a metal table. Sharp instruments were on the tables to my left and right. My head was viciously pounding as I tugged desperately against the straps securing my arms and legs. The air smelled vaguely of ammonia and sweat, but not exactly. I couldn't place it, but the place seemed familiar. A door directly in front of me opened, and 3 of the creatures shambled in silently. "What do you want with me?" I screamed. "Please just kill me. I don't want to suffer. I know you're intelligent beings. Can't you see I'm just like you?" The beings looked at one another quizzically. Then, finally, the one in the center approached the table, reached out with its tentacle, and stroked my head with it. "Of course we do, honey," the creature said in my mother's voice. "How did you do that?" I stammered. "You sound just like her." "Oh dear," she chuckled. "You really did get fried, didn't you?" The other 2 approached the table on either side. "You see," one said in my sister's voice, "we don't sound like your family." "We're your family," the other said in my father's voice. Suddenly they shapeshifted into perfect replications of my family. I stared, mouth agape in shock. "I told you we erased his mind too much," my newly transformed sister said. "You'd better hope the backup memories work." "I'm confident they will," Dad said. "You've been through a lot, but it's almost over. So now, relax while we reboot your real memories." They stuck a needle in my arm, and all of my memories came flooding back to me. My true form is not that of a human, but a noble race of creatures cast away from their homeland in exile. They sent me to assess the viability of Earth as a new home for our pilgrims. My job was to dispose of and take the place of the household's most trusted family member. In this case, it was poor Jonathan. Once in place, I acted as an unwitting antenna, collecting data for my family, who monitored the situation in the skies above. This process was repeated across Earth with hundreds of families until every pilgrim had a home. Shapeshifting is easy, but I am no actor. So to sell the ruse, we harvested Jonathan's memories and imported them into my consciousness. Naturally, this required the wiping of my real memory first. Admittedly, it's a shoddy process that degrades over time and requires frequent re-examinations and surgeries to maintain, hence the restless nights. Everything seemed unfamiliar to me because it was. I was the imposter, a stranger living out of place in a human family acting perfectly normally. "Mother, father, sister," I whispered with tears in my eyes. "I missed you so much." "As we did you," father said, smiling in his human form. "Through your work, we are ready to inhabit the Earth together as a family. We descended once again to the planet that we would now call home." It felt good to lie in my comfy bed and close my eyes, knowing I'd wake up to my real family again in the morning. My sister and I never got along too well growing up. She had the most grating voice imaginable, and she used it solely to annoy me. Like nails on a chalkboard, she'd screech her way into my brain, "Have you been to Bora Bora yet? Oh, I don't suppose you have. You know, with your job and everything. You just have to go. Me and the hubby went last week, but I'm sure it'd be just as fun by yourself." Or you could go and find yourself a man to take you if you ever went out and got some sun. She just goes on and on. How would she know what it's like to live my life? She got all the best part of our parents, our mother's beautiful complexion, our father's piercing blue eyes. Me? I was born to live a life of mediocrity and with a body to match it. My metabolism switched off at 16, so I've put on a few pounds since then. My muddy brown eyes and frizzy hair didn't do a lot to supplement my dark personality. She had it all. How did she have the right to critique me? All of this was fine until her divorce. She needed a place to stay, so she basically invited herself to live with me through the whole process. If you think her divorce did anything to quell her incessant nagging and criticisms, you'd be dead wrong. I think the stress actually made her worse. Every single day I was a prisoner in my own home. Every time I left my room was a chance for her to sink her fangs into me and talk my ear off about some inane bullshit. This went on for weeks and weeks through her messy divorce. One particular night, she had a few too many glasses of wine and she started on one of her epic, multi-hour rants. I wasn't just going to sit there anymore and be her therapist, so I stood up and walked off into my bedroom. But then she followed me. How dare you just walk off when I'm talking to you? Is that any way to treat your own sister? What would Mom say? I couldn't take any more. So I killed her. I got up off the bed, grabbed a lamp, and beat her death. It was the first time in many, many years I had felt that good. Ironically, straddled over her unrecognizable corpse, I decided I would turn my life around. So I washed my hands of the gore, threw the body out under the porch, and went to bed. The next day after work, I went to the gym and ran my ass off. I felt so light and free knowing I would head home without that nagging bitch there to ruin my night. Except when I got home, she was there. In the same damn outfit on my couch, sipping her fancy wine. Oh, thank God you're back. You just won't believe what my ex-husband said today at court, she said, giving me the once-over, oh God, what happened to you? You look terrible. I couldn't understand what was happening, but I had already decided I wasn't going to put up with this anymore. So I killed her again. This time with a kitchen knife. I leapt over the couch, blade in hand, and made her insides her outsides. I cleaned the knife before taking her body out to the porch, but when I got there I couldn't believe my eyes. Her body was still lying there on the dirt. I didn't know what to think. I just tossed her fresh body on top of the old one and went back inside. Every day I came home, it was the same thing. Little things changed, like where she was sitting or how I killed her, but every single day after the gym I'd come home and she was still there. By the end of the month, I had a pile of corpses under the porch so high it was spilling out into the yard. Meanwhile, no matter what I did at the gym, I never got any healthier. I couldn't drop the weight. No matter how long and hard I ran, I didn't drop a single pound, but none of that mattered to me when I met Nick. I met Nick at the gym one evening on my way out and we hit off. We went downtown, had some drinks, and he said he'd call me soon so we could hang out again. I was completely smitten with him. It had been so long since a guy had even so much as talked to me. But Nick never called. I waited and waited, and it became increasingly clear that he had stood me up. I skipped work and waited outside the gym all day for him to show up. Finally, around 7 p.m. he came out, tired and sweaty from his usual routine. I jumped out of my car and ran over to him. He noticed me and I waved, but he just seemed to ignore me and walk over to his car. I wasn't going to just stop there. He had to give me an answer for all the missed calls and the hours I had waited on him. I caught up to him, but he didn't even look me in the eye. Geez, can't you take a hint? I'm just not that into you. I'm sorry, he said, but I didn't let him finish. I jammed my nail file into his eyes. He barely had time to scream, and then I bashed his brains out onto the pavement. God, that felt good. I got back in my car and headed home. Guess I won't be going back to that gym anytime soon. When I walked in the door, my sister was waiting for me. Ha ha ha, how could you think he'd be into you? How could you think anyone would be into someone like you? She cackled. I ran bloodlust at her, but tonight she fought back. It didn't matter for her though. For once, I was thankful for my heavier build and weight. Once she lay lifelessly, I didn't even bother to throw her body out. It wouldn't have fit under the porch anyways. I crawled into bed and was nearly asleep when there was a knock on the door. Open up, San Francisco Police Department. We have some questions for about the disappearance of your sister, Mrs. Sinclair. I crawled out of bed and made my way to the door. I stepped over her body and the blood pooling on the floor. I'm not worried. I don't have anything to hide. As soon as I opened the door, they were on me. I was handcuffed and arrested on the spot. Apparently someone had seen the vicious display outside of the gym, and they had found my sister's body underneath my porch, now many weeks old and rotted beyond recognition. I didn't even care at this point. I admitted to all of it, and they sentenced me to life without parole. At least I'll never have to see my sister's snobby face again, I thought. I was placed in solitary since I was deemed too dangerous and unstable for Gin Pop, but when I walked in my cell, there she sat against the padded walls, familiar wine glass still in hand. She laughed and laughed as I beat her with my fists. I beat her till my hands turned black and blue, but she never stopped laughing. I was stuck here with her. Forever. Last week I was leaving a gas station when I felt a sharp pain in my side. The homeless man who I had just denied change was holding a small dirty syringe. I remember staring at him in shock and disgust as I fell into a deep, unwilling sleep. Apparently the man hadn't noticed the multiple witnesses when he attempted this attack. I was told that I was saved before he could do anything. All my blood tests came back fine, and I was given an antibiotic just in case. I was told he injected me with some sort of homebrew sedative and it might have some side effects as I process it out of my system. That night I had horrible nightmares about the man and all sorts of fears. I woke with a splitting headache, a dull throbbing pain, and a sharp pain coming in waves. My head was full of cotton. I turned on the light of my bathroom and tried taking my temperature. This task proved impossible as I couldn't focus on the numbers in front of me. Everything was fuzzy and dark. I drank some water and I only then realized how dry my mouth was. I peeled my tongue from the roof of my mouth as I attempted to swallow the water, a feat I found near impossible. After choking down the first sips, my thirst became unquenchable. I drank from the tap for an uninterrupted 30 seconds, sucking deep the water until I physically couldn't. I had risen from the sink for but a moment, whipping my head back down to puke it all out. Or what I had assumed was most of it. Along with the surprising volume of fluid, there was a black bile. It stayed separate from the water in the sink and danced near the edge of where the tap was still running. It had a strange colorful shine in the light, similar to an oil slick. I returned to bed feeling hydrated, nauseous, and exhausted. The next morning, I peeled my face from my pillow. Looking around, I noticed the blood. A small crust of dried blood outlined where my face had been on the pillow. I felt my face gently and realized it was extremely painful. Touching my face felt like touching a giant pimple, inflamed and sensitive. Approaching my bathroom mirror again, I made two discoveries. 1. I had open sores surrounding the left side of my mouth. 2. The rest of my face was fine. The source of the pain was my hands. The fingers were dark, swollen, and clubbed. The flesh tender and painful. The cuticles of my nails seemed to retract. I gave my doctor a call and he told me to come in later that afternoon. I cooked myself a simple omelet for breakfast. I found it extremely difficult as my arms disobeyed me slightly, shaking and moving in ways I didn't want them to. Plating the meal, I turned to carry the plate to the table and was startled by a sudden sound of glass shattering. I looked around frantically for the source when I realized it was the plate. My hands were stiff and completely numb. The meal lay ruined on the floor. At this point, I decided to go to the emergency room. I had trouble navigating the stairs, and upon collapsing to the floor, my arms and legs stiff and uncooperative, I decided to call an ambulance. At the hospital, I was immediately put on 4-drip and they asked me a ton of questions. The doctors had discovered a series of small porous lesions across my stomach. The sight made me sick. A tight pack of holes surrounded by gray dead flesh. These holes went deep too. I couldn't bear to look at them. I gently explored with my fingers and found that I couldn't feel them. I could only feel that dull pressure, no sensation. I was sitting anxiously gripping my thighs, waiting for some answers. I was stressed and sick, and feeling my own body change in such a way struck me with a hopeless kind of terror. That's when I felt it. A soft wetness and a slight pain. I looked at my hands on my thighs when I screamed. My thumbnail had pierced the thin, bloated skin of my thigh through my pants. I frantically struggled to pull down my pants and revealed my legs were black and purple, covered in deep pus-filled lesions. I couldn't feel any of it. I felt weak but overall normal, and I was looking at my skin and flesh being destroyed. The doctors moved me to a clean room until everything was sorted out. They did all sorts of tests and took many samples. I was never scared of needles, but the long, thick needle they used to take fluid from my back was mortifying. I began writing this because I fear this disease will take me. I wanted to record a few thoughts, even if they are delusional. The man in the suit. Before asking me for money and later attacking me, the homeless man was talking to a businessman for an extended period of time. As I approached, I remember them both turning to stare at me. I only remembered seeing this man because I saw him again, looking through the window to my room. I pretended to be asleep and saw him just staring at me. What if this man had given him the syringe instead of the aforementioned spare change? I'm recording this via voice text as my arms no longer function properly. The nurse came in the morning and I woke with a start, swinging my arms wildly at her. I had no control as I watched my rotting hands claw at her. Eventually, the loose flesh on my arms sloughed off, exposing bare bone and muscle. The nurse showered in my putrefied flesh, vomited inside her clean suit. She left the room. I cried out in horror, shock, disgust, and sadness. I couldn't control the movement of my altered limbs. My arm's bone was black, covered in dark lean muscle and thick tight sinew. No extraneous flesh remained on my long bony clawed hand. The doctors had restrained me and we both agreed it was in our best interest. All I could do was apologize. I felt my legs rubbing against the thick straps. I could feel the flesh deteriorating, giving way to my new limbs. The doctors came in to give me some new when my long black arm broke free, slashing through his suit, and I'm sure my bony claw didn't stop at his suit. They sedated me as they retrieved their colleague. When I woke, they told me the man I infected progressed much faster, and this disease would soon kill me. Apparently, he requested to be killed. I was too weak for that. Because of my restraints, I can't see much, but I can see my exposed ribcage. Its form was dark and twisted. Sharp black bony growths all over my torso. My organs were shrunken and tight to my spinal cord. All extra meat and organ has melted and rotted away. As my limbs smash against my restraints, I can feel my jaw loosening and new teeth growing in. A moment ago, I stood up, bringing the hospital bed with me. I feel lightheaded and it's hard to focus. Nothing seems real anymore, and I can't remember anything about who I was. My new arms finally escaped their restraints and I am free. Sometimes I hear it scuttling in the shadows or behind the walls. I rarely witness it, but when I do, it's always a blur that disappears into the shadows, and it never happens when I expect it to. I know I sound off my rocker, but there is a monster that lives in my apartment. I first heard its calls 5 days ago, the same day my sister, her husband, and their daughter came over to visit before they left for a vacation. It was the middle of the night when the sound rose from the darkness, freezing my blood. Its call sounded like an orchestra of string instruments being played by gorillas with a propensity for causing as much pain as possible. That was the first in a long series of nights that seemed to never end. The next morning when I got up, I found my chair was torn and the stuffing was partially dragged out. I was physically attacked by this monster the following night while sleeping. The monster plunged its fangs and talons into my feet, attempting to shred my flesh from its bones. I wanted to go to a hospital to have it looked at, but I am afraid of what they may tell me. What if it gave me some kind of disease when it scratched and bit me? After 2 days without sleep, my mind was playing tricks on me. I think the beast enjoys chaos. Returning home, I sometimes find my clothes torn and laying on the floor or the remains of a digested meal. It even knocked over the urn of great-grandma and scattered the ashes. I decided to ask around for help and thankfully found people online. Unfortunately, since I had not seen this beast and couldn't give a description, they couldn't tell me exactly what I would need, but they did recommend that I buy books of wards and rituals. In a New Age shop, I loaded up with everything from charms to Christian crosses in the silver and gold variety, since one may work better than the other. I didn't expect to buy as much as I did that day, but the weight of all the charms around my neck is a small price to pay for safety. People online also recommended that I purchase incense and sage to purge the beast. After performing all the rituals I could and surrounding my bed with salt, I finally felt comfortable enough to sleep. As soon as my head hit the pillow, I was out of it. I don't know how long I was out of it, but when I woke up it was dark. That isn't what woke me though. There was something laying on top of my hip. Its tail was twitching back and forth, slapping my leg, and I was too afraid to move. When my alarm clock went off, the beast ran away. It was the first time I was thankful for having an alarm clock, if I am being honest. When I went to the kitchen, I saw some more of the creature's destruction. This time it decided to tear apart a throw pillow. I am not the kind of person who likes to tell people if I need help, so I didn't tell my friends or family about this, even though I knew that if I did they would offer me a spare bedroom or a couch. Each day I go without sleep, it's as if the shadows get darker and larger. I am not sure if I am going crazy or not. Even as I think this, I wonder, did I just see the beast? Some people online told me about the origin of Halloween and how people would place offerings of milk out for ghosts and goblins to calm them. They recommended that I do the same thing. I sat a small bowl of milk out and ran out to buy offerings of meat at the store. When I returned, I saw that the milk had been drunk, so I put out a piece of bologna. I looked away for only a moment, and when I looked back, the meat was gone. These offerings are only a band-aid. I need to identify this monster if I am to have any chance of being free of it. The following night, my blood ran cold when I heard the monster in the walls between my bed and my neighbor's apartment. On the other side of the wall is an old woman who lives all by herself. I should have got up and run to her rescue, but at that moment I was a coward and didn't do anything except cover my head and drown out the sounds with tuneless humming. I rearm all the traps I have set up the next morning and cry because of how useless these traps are and how helpless I feel. It's at this point where I get more glances of the creature. A tuft of hair here, a tail there. Seeing all this, I wish I was never born. I cannot do this for much longer. I am not religious and I was reluctant to ask a priest for help. However, at this point I have no other option. He said the church no longer does exorcisms, that demons are a way to explain the evils in the world and not to be taken literally. When I insist that I am living with some sort of entity, he recommends prayer. I caused a bit of a scene when he said this and stormed off. My friends started to notice how much I have changed and how I am isolating myself, so they reach out to me. I told them everything was fine because I do not want to bother them with my burden. As we speak, I take my time bringing up the possibility of borrowing his gun so I could go duck hunting. Thankfully, he believed me. I do not like being dishonest, but I don't see another way out of this situation. If the tables were reversed and he were to tell me about a monster, I would not believe him. That night I didn't try to sleep. I sat in my bed with the loaded weapon and waited for the monster to show itself. The moment it rears its ugly head, I was going to end its life or die trying. Hours pass. I think I might have nodded off with the gun in my lap. I wake up suddenly and raise the gun to the door where I thought the beast would appear. I cocked the gun, putting a shell in the chamber while at the same time ejecting the one I forgot was already in there. As I pan the gun left and right, waiting for my eyes to adjust, I look for any movement. After a few moments, I see that the wards on the floor made out of salt have been spread all over. I really should not be surprised. The wards offered me no help yet. Why should I expect things to be different now? Feeling pressure on my bladder, I dread getting out of bed when it is dark. Under the bed, the monster could wait for me to put my foot on the floor. I feel like a child all over again, scared of the dark, scared of monsters. In truth, I am afraid of everything. After a silent prayer, I jump off the bed, and as soon as my foot touches the ground, I sprint to the bathroom and shut the door. Unfortunately, I didn't bring the gun with me. Deciding to sit on the cold toilet instead of standing up to urinate, I consider sleeping here with the door shut. Before I know it, I am asleep once again. I woke up to the sound of loud and rapid scratching. In that tiny gap between the door and the floor, I see a white claw reaching out towards me. Needle-like claws extended and excitedly scrape the floor as if it's trying to pull the floor and me towards its awaiting maw. A moment later, the claw turns and reaches towards the doorknob. I am thankful I am already on the toilet because I scream like a child, and because I don't remember the last time I ate, I faint. When I wake up, it's to the sound of my phone ringing on the other side of the door. As soon as I build enough courage, I burst through the bathroom door and sprint to my bed where the phone and the gun lay. Instead of grabbing the gun, I look at my phone. 4 voicemails and 6 missed calls, all of which are from my boss. He said that I was fired in the last voicemail. This should upset me more than it does, but how could losing a job compare to living with some kind of demon? Forcing myself to eat, I open the fridge and the smell of old spoiled food breaks me. I cry harder than I ever have in my life. Babies don't cry this much. The anticipation of being attacked was almost worse than actually being attacked. I shout, challenging the beast to reveal itself as my knuckles turn white around the gun. I position a chair in the corner so I can see more of my house, and I wait for the monster. Outside, I hear people go about their day. I hear birds chirp, cars start, and in the distance I hear a school bell ring indicating that the students are about to go home. Everyone else gets to feel normal. Again, I cry. There was a moment I thought I heard a woman screaming in the hallway outside, but it ended up being one of those happy screams. I cry yet again. The only time I move from that chair is when I go to turn on the lights just before it gets dark. After all, I need to see the monster in order to shoot it. If the monster survives the blast, it would kill me. If that is the case, at least this nightmare would be over and I would be able to finally sleep. Weighing the pros and the cons of living, as well as the gun in my hand, I made a decision and put the barrel of the gun in my mouth. Slowly, I apply pressure to the trigger, knowing that at any time this thing will go off and my suffering would be over. I think about the poor bastard who would have to clean this mess for a second, but quickly set that thought aside. As soon as I shoot, it would not be my problem. I add more pressure to the trigger with the business end of the gun in my mouth. My lips tighten on the barrel and I cry more, my finger not easing the tension on the trigger. That was when the phone rang. I pull the barrel out of my mouth on the third ring to see who is calling me. Wiping tears from my eyes, I pick up the phone and see it is my sister who just came back from her vacation. She is the one person who could talk me off of this cliff. Hello? I answer as calmly as I can muster. Hey, I'm coming over, be there in 5 minutes, she says. What? Why? I ask, surprised. I'm picking up my cat today. Thanks for watching it when we were gone. 12 people have mysteriously gone missing in this town within the last year, the news reporter on the television announced. I stirred the little dinner I had left that I was too full to stomach. I turned to look at my sister. She sat unusually tense and seemed worried. My sister and I were in our mid-20s. We had recently moved out of our parents' house and settled on being roommates in a new home that we rented. We suspect a serial killer of sorts is on the loose, the reporter continued. Damn. 12 people. Wonder what happened. I said, trying to make conversation. My sister and I used to get along great, but recently something had been off with her. She acted secretive, constantly seemed paranoid that someone was watching her and lashing out over the smallest of things. I watched her already tensed up body tense up even more after what I had spoken. She shakily took a bite of her food. How was work today? She asked suddenly, clearly trying to change the subject. I let out a sigh. It was fine. I replied just before getting up with my bowl and starting toward the kitchen. What is wrong with her? I placed my bowl in the sink but froze when my eyes met a dark red stained knife sitting in the corner. It appeared just as blood would. My heart skipped a beat. Chelsea, what is this in the sink? I yelled to my sister. I instantly heard her drop her fork and began to hastily walk towards the kitchen. What are you talking about? She questioned while standing in front of me, her face worried and her hands restless. I grabbed the knife and held it up to her. Her eyes became impossibly wide. I as she stammered anxiously. I was incredibly suspicious at this point. My heart began to race as a thought crept into my mind. Could she be the killer? I began to shake my head. No, that's impossible. She would never. I made a salad. It had raspberry dressing. I guess it was bad or something, she continued. I stood there frozen. I wasn't sure of how to reply. I could sense she was questioning whether or not I was suspicious of her. How about I do the dishes for you? She offered just after a nervous smile formed across her face. I dropped the knife and walked out of the kitchen without saying anything. I started up the stairs and entered my room. The same question repeated in my mind. What is wrong with her? The knife looked nothing like raspberry dressing to me. There was no mistaking it. There was blood on that knife. I plopped down in my old decaying office chair and continued to think. My stomach churned every time the thought of my sister being the killer returned. My back shot up straight when I heard my sister walk away from the kitchen and then into her room. I heard her bedroom door close and lock behind her. When we had first moved in, she picked the bedroom that was downstairs. I knew I had to do something to ease my suspicions about her. A little investigating won't hurt. I got up from my desk and exited my room. Halfway down the hallway, my sister's door came into view. Just looking at it caused a wave of nausea to wash over me. I took a deep breath and continued on. I got on the floor and looked through the bottom crack of the door. It was covered with a towel. What the hell? I put my ear to the door, but instantly stood up when I heard her footsteps start toward the door. She unlocked the door and opened it. Her eyes looked wild. What are you doing? She questioned. I am going downstairs. I replied awkwardly and then walked into my room. Weirdo! I heard her shout across the hall just after I entered my bedroom and closed my door. I stopped in front of my door and froze. What is she doing there? I heard her door close and lock once again. It felt wrong to invade her privacy like this, but I made the choice to be selfish for my own ease of mind. I continued to stand there, my mind racing, trying to come up with an idea of how I could see into her bedroom. Just as I was about to give up, an idea struck my mind and my face lit up. Her bedroom had a window that looked out into our backyard. If I used the ladder, I took a sharp inhale and started down the stairs. I can use the ladder to reach her window. I'll just have to be quiet out there. I opened the sliding glass door that led into the backyard. I looked up at her window and felt relief when I saw that her curtains had not been shut. I turned to my left and gazed at the old rusty ladder in the far end of the yard. I quickly and quietly made it to the ladder, taking a path that would ensure I would not be visible if she were to look out her window. I touched the ladder and let out an audible scream when a spider began to crawl on my hand. I smacked the spider off and then cupped my hand with my mouth. My stomach dropped. Did she hear that? I turned to face the window and stared at it, frozen, waiting to see if she would look out of it. I unfroze and took a silent breath of relief when enough time had passed and she hadn't looked out. I turned to look at the ladder. I examined it, looking for any more spiders or insects that made their home there. I picked up the ladder and started towards her window, making sure to take the same path I took to reach the ladder. I reached her window and I carefully placed the ladder in front of it. I stealthily extended the ladder to reach her window. It was a few feet below the window, but high up enough that I would be able to see into it. I placed one foot on the ladder but gasped and froze when I heard a horrifying thwack come from her room. Now I knew for certain I had to look through. I placed my other foot on the ladder. I slowly and cautiously continued up the ladder until I was one step away from seeing in. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath as an attempt to prepare myself for whatever I might see. I opened my eyes and took the final step. I was absolutely petrified and horrified at the scene presented to me. My sister and I locked eyes. Her eyes were frightened with a tinge of malice. She was holding an axe halfway to the ground as if she were just about to finish swinging it once more. Below the axe was a decaying corpse with its head chopped off. The moment felt surreal. I could have never imagined to see something like this in my lifetime. I badly wanted to stop staring, but I couldn't. My sister suddenly ran and exited her room. Shortly after, I heard footsteps began to hurriedly dash down the stairs. She's coming for me. She came into view. She was running down the stairs, the axe still in hand. She was skipping steps at a time. I felt genuinely terrified of my sister. My survival instincts kicked in and I swiftly climbed down the ladder. I ran to the sliding glass door and pressed my entire body against it in an attempt to stop her from reaching me. I couldn't lock it from the outside. I jumped away from the door just after she swung her axe at it. I turned around and saw she had partially cracked the strong glass. I examined the axe. It was covered with fresh blood. A ferocious and murderous smile formed across her face. I stood there, guard higher than ever. God damn it. I have to do something. My sister began to slowly open the door, the smile remaining on her face, as if she were trying to taunt me. I examined the area around me, desperately searching for anything that could aid me in this situation. My face lit up when I caught the umbrella on our patio. My sister had noticed my glance in its direction. Instead of continuing to slowly open the door with a menacing smile, her face turned worried and she forcefully pushed the door the rest of the way open. I bolted to the umbrella and swiftly forced a large pole out of its stand. I held the umbrella upside down. The actual umbrella would soften the impact between her and the pole. I groaned and powerfully swung at the axe, causing it to be forcefully removed from her grip. The worry in her face grew larger. I sensed she was about to attempt to get a hold of the axe again, so I swung at her. She instinctively put her arms in front of her in defense. She screamed in pain as the large pole impacted her arms. I swung again and again until she was curled up on the ground, screaming and crying in pain. I decided to take my chances and make a run for it. I dropped my weapon and jumped over her body and into the house. I ran up the stairs, leaping as I skipped steps at a time. I reached my door and began to scream in fear and frustration when the handle wouldn't turn. She locked me out. Fuck! I yelled out just before hot tears began to stream down my face. A shiver ran down my spine when I heard irregular footsteps and quiet whimps. In my hurried panic to escape, I had completely forgotten to lock her outside. I turned to my left and then to my right, trying to find a way to escape. I swore under my breath when my sister came into view. She was badly beaten and limping, but she held the axe. She started to walk up the stairs slowly, but as quickly as she could, considering her body's damage. I took a deep breath. Chelsea, you don't have to do this. Please. I pleaded. My plea invoked no reaction from her. She continued to struggle up the stairs. Chelsea, please just let me go. I won't tell anyone, I promise. I pleaded once more in a sob. It's too late, she replied through pained breaths. I realized that my pleads were no use. I had to find a way to escape this. I turned to the stairs and an idea struck me. I needed to jump. There was no time to consider the pros and cons of the decision. I jumped to the first step of the stairs and vaulted over the railing. My stomach dropped once my hands left the railing. To my dismay, I landed in an awkward position on the first floor. My legs went limp and painful. I screeched in pain, but also fear as I realized what this meant for me. I was now incredibly vulnerable. I was laying on the floor, legs hurt. I took a look at my sister. She was now smiling and slowly coming down the stairs, axe in hand. I tried to crawl away, but even my hurt sister was faster than my crawl. My breath stopped as my legs began to get dragged across the floor by my sister. She stopped and turned me over to face her. I only remember feeling confused when I saw her switch her grip to the axe head. She then began to swing the wooden side of the axe repeatedly at my head. Eventually, stars began to engulf my vision until I was unconscious. I awoke to a severe pounding sensation that started in the center of my head and then quickly spread throughout its entirety as I gained back full consciousness. I sat up and was horrified to see where I was. I sat in a cold and dark basement. Dozens of decaying body parts surrounded me. I turned over and vomited when the stench of death hit me. I got up. My legs still hurt badly, but I was able to walk with a limp. I squinted and saw a staircase a small length away. I clenched my teeth and hissed each step I took. I had made it to the stairs, and I then switched to a crawling maneuver to reach the top. The top was a concrete square with light shining through the cracks. I pressed up on it, but was stopped by something heavy on top of it. I lifted it up once more, now enough to barely see the outside. I recognized it as my sister's room, and my stomach sank. How is this even possible? My brain quickly connected the dots when I remembered the real estate agents had mentioned the house contained a basement when we were first viewing it. By the time we moved in, I had completely forgotten about it, and my sister never mentioned it. It would explain her bizarre insistence on having the downstairs bedroom. She knew it was located there and had planned this murder spree all along, I realized. I pushed on the ceiling once more, this time with more force. I groaned in frustration while I was only able to open it slightly more than before. I swore under my breath and gagged as the smell of death entered my nostrils again. I took off my shirt and tied it around my face like a bandana. The putrid smell still lingered, but not nearly as bad as before. I realized that the only way I could escape was if I somehow managed to push the ceiling with enough force that it would cause the obstruction to fall backwards. I took a deep breath and placed my hands on the ceiling. I counted to 3 in my head and began to push upwards with every bit of strength that was left within me. I continued to push with great force until I heard the obstruction fall and the pressure on the ceiling was gone and it flung open. I let go of the ceiling and took deep breaths from exhaustion. When I finally caught my breath, I pushed the ceiling open once more, this time with ease. I painfully made my way up the last step and into my sister's room. I quickly shut the entrance to the basement with my foot. I felt a mix of relief and horror. I was free, but there was of course the reality that my beloved sister was a serial killer. The door to my sister's bedroom was wide open. I quickly walked out of the room, still limping from the pain of my legs. I walked to my room and looked out of the window, which looked out into the driveway. I let out a sigh of relief when I saw that my sister's car was not there. I had not the slightest clue of where my phone was, and I knew I couldn't afford to look for it. Instead, I went down the stairs and dialed 911 using her house phone. I explained the story to the operator in short and ragged breaths. I stayed on the phone, waiting for help to arrive. I became paralyzed with fear each time I heard a car drive down the street, praying that it was not my sister. Minutes later, I was escorted to the hospital by an ambulance. I was diagnosed with a fractured leg, but I had already expected such. I am now staying at my mother's house. She has not taken the news of her daughter's actions lightly. She has spent the last few days lying in bed crying. I have been following the news and my sister has been missing since the day I caught her. I have been writing this on my mother's laptop for the past few days. I am utterly traumatized by what I have witnessed and gone through, and I really needed to tell someone. This happened to me last year. I haven't used Snapchat ever again after this incident, and my advice to all the people using it is to take caution and find out everything about the privacy settings with the app, unless you want the possibility of what happened to me. I've become obsessed with the fire streak that appears when you send snaps to someone on a daily basis on Snapchat, and my obsession was such that I'd started sending snaps to complete strangers just because I wanted to have the longest streak number on my phone. I had several people for these streaks and knew none of them. One day, got a request by a person called SnapFreak666, and being the unassuming Snapchat obsessive, didn't think twice before accepting. SnapFreak666 was on my Snapchat list for 364 days, and they were among the topmost streaks on my list by this point. All I ever did was send random pictures to this person. It could be the picture of my room, my partial reflection in the mirror, or the outside of my house. I would pretty much always just send pictures of my surroundings because taking a random shot was easier. I'd gotten used to sending pictures of outside my house as well. My room window was always open, whether it was day or night, as our house had a large front area and a gate as an entrance. My window had a net, which I kept shut. Other than that, anyone could see inside my room, although the angle was such that it would be very difficult for someone to peek in from outside. On this night, SnapFreak666 sent me a number 365 decorated in order to celebrate a year worth of snaps to each other. Feeling appreciative myself, I congratulated back. This was my first ever direct message to this person. I then got a reply from them. Congrats to you as well. You're my most streak person, too. I was a bit too proud of my streak history and informed SnapFreak666 that I had another friend with whom I'd already hit the 500 mark. I got their reply, which brought a worried crease to my forehead. That's not effing funny. Thinking this person's idea for a joke was dark humor, I ignored the message, not having any inclination to ever message back and only stick to sending snaps. I then got another message, which I didn't check. However, the Snapchat notification continued to buzz for about a full minute with messages. I was taken too much by surprise and opened the chat box. Am I joke to you? So you've been treating me as a second option this whole time. Don't ignore me. Who is this other person? I swear, if you ignore me, reply back now. Answer the damn messages. The messages freaked me out. This person was taking all this too seriously. They sounded genuinely miffed by the fact I had someone else with a higher number of streaks. I replied back, "This isn't funny. Please stop messaging me. Thanks. So you want to throw away 365 days like nothing? You used me. Tell me who this person is now. Delete this person from your list. Delete them so on the top of your streaks. Delete them or else." I tossed my phone aside after reading these messages. It wasn't funny in the slightest. I regretted ever adding this person to my Snapchat and tried to recall anything out of the ordinary they had sent over the last year. Now that I thought about it, they had only ever sent pictures that looked out of a car window. I thought it was interesting because I got the idea this person liked to travel a lot. As this thought had entered my mind, I ignored it completely and decided to watch TV instead, hoping I'd put this behind by distracting myself. After a half hour, I heard my phone ringing and remembered my mother had mentioned she called to check in on me. I was too late to pick up the call, but noticed the front gate was open as peeked out the window. I didn't worry, though, because it was the gardener picking his tools up. But I also noticed I'd gotten another notification from SnapFreak666. I opened the snap to see they'd send me around a dozen of them, most of them videos. Surprised, I opened them. My breath was then caught in my throat. The first video was of a car driving through the main road. It skidded into a lonelier road which seemed to be around a suburban area. The next videos showed the person slowly driving around the block, circling around houses and stopping every so often, zooming in on those where the lights were on. My hands were trembling by the time the next video showed the person leaving the car and making their way on road by foot. They reached a house and stopped. The camera shifted up to show the gate. Enormous relief flooded in me as I saw the house was nothing like mine. It was just a failed attempt at scaring me. However, there was a message at the end. "Show me you've deleted that person from your list, because I'll find you and delete it myself." I didn't respond and called my parents to come home as soon as they could. They were around 2 hours away, so they told me to call the patrolling guard in the neighborhood to keep me company until they arrived. The bell rang, and I sprang up to let the guard in through the gate. He wasn't there. Instead, I saw a box next to the gate. It was decorated like for a special occasion, and when I picked it up, I got the unmistakable scent of frosted icing. I opened the box to find a birthday cake on top of which rested 3 candles, 365. The box fell out of my hands. I was alone out here. If that person was here, I was exposed to them. On instinct, I ran back inside and sealed the gate. My first thought was to call my parents again and needed to call them from my phone which I'd left in the room. I reached the front door, but before I could get in, I saw a phone on the front door mat. What terrified me was the fact that it wasn't my phone. I picked it up to see the picture of a person sitting somewhere. The picture was dim, so I had to brighten the screen. I almost dropped the phone in horror as I saw myself sitting on my bed. It was a picture of me. Someone had taken it from outside my bedroom window. In the photo, I was looking down on my phone, too distracted to see the person who had snapped it. I backed away in fear, not realizing I was heading toward the gate I just barred shut. but I was too scared to go back to the front door. I had the worst feeling that person was somewhere around there. The only idea that came to my mind was to run back to the window and climb in through that way. I slowly traipsed back to the front of the house and reached the window. I could see my room inside. As I was about to open the window net, the phone in my hand buzzed the familiar Snapchat tune. A notification had never petrified as this, because the name of the sender belonged to me. I brought my trembling thumb to open the chat and saw a single message. "I told you I'd find you." A shadow fell over my face as I read this message and realized the light that had been falling onto me from inside the room through the window net was blocked. I raised my head, knowing what I would see would be one of my greatest fears. I was right. There was a man standing in there. We were only separated by the window net that between us. I stood deadly still as the man raised a hand, in which I saw my phone, and waved his fingers playfully at me. My shriek of terror was stuck in my throat, and it refused to let out as the man brought a knife to his lips, which were curled ever so slightly upwards in a twisted sense of satisfaction, and typed a message with his other hand. I looked down at the phone. Shush. I didn't dare move. The reflection of the light on the shining knife cut through my eyes. The man pressed the knife so tightly to his lips, it was as if he wanted to pierce them to taste the blood that would spill out. He turned my phone screen toward me, and I saw him press the name belonging to my friend, the number 500 accompanying the fire streak on it. Within the next couple seconds, he deleted my friend's name, leaving Snapfreak 666 365 number as the highest streak level. The man placed my phone on the windowsill and pointed for me to place his phone there as well. I complied. We stood there for what felt like hours before he uttered his next words. "Happy 1-year anniversary," he cackled, the way a predator would after finally capturing his hunt. I saw the knife in his hand move away from his lips and didn't stop to see what his intentions were. I ran back to the front gate, finding it bolted as I'd left it. I was screaming in desperation, certain the man had torn through the window net and was seconds away from piercing my skin with the knife. I fought through my tears to open the lock on the gate and succeeded just as the patrolling guard arrived. He was armed, and I ran behind his frame for cover. The guard moved in and I heard the loud sound of a gunshot. For one mind-numbing minute, I feared the worst, but then peeked inside to find him holding the intruder at gunpoint. The man's arm had been grazed by the bullet. The guard instructed me to call the police, and thankfully they arrived in just a few minutes. Chillingly, the intruder never tried to fight or even argue. He just laughed, telling me he would always be at the top of my Snapchat streak list. Once he was taken away and I was safe, I was told by the police that similar cases were known to have happened, and that there was evidently a feature in Snapchat that showed your location to the people in your list. The intruder, or Snapfreak 666, had mapped out my house's location and knew the interior because of all the pictures I'd sent over the last year. He'd sneaked in when the gardener had opened the gate and entered the room from the window, which only had a net to separate the inside from the outside. Since this ordeal, I've gotten a proper window seal. I've also started taking extra precautions to my safety and am always vigilant. My friend was disappointed when I ended our Snapchat streak at 500 days, even more so when I refused to ever use Snapchat again at all. All I know is that I'll always be careful with my phone and social media from now. Needless to say, I barely ever use either anymore.